The popcorn bowl sat between us, half empty, the kind of comfortable domestic moment that makes you forget the world has teeth. We were arguing about what to watch, the pleasant, low-stakes kind of argument married people have when everything is actually fine. He wanted something loud and action-heavy. I wanted something quiet with subtitles. Neither of us wanted to compromise and neither of us really cared, which is the particular alchemy of a relationship that's settled into itself. The television waited. The popcorn cooled. Then his phone lit up. 6:42 p.m. on a Thursday in what had been, up until that precise second, a completely unremarkable evening. He glanced at the screen the way you do when you're expecting nothing, a reflex, an eye roll already forming. Then something shifted. The easy expression on his face became something else entirely. Something careful. The way a person looks when they're translating bad news in real time before they have to say it out loud. "It's my brother," he said. I wasn't worried yet. His family's group chats were legendary, a constantly churning river of opinions, forwarded articles, unsolicited advice, and drama that almost never amounted to anything. Someone was always summoning everyone somewhere for a reason that turned out to be minor. I had learned, over the years, not to read too much into urgency that came from that direction. But the way his thumb hovered over the screen without moving. The way his jaw set like a closing door. "He wants me at Mom and Dad's," he said. "Now." Says it's important. There are sentences in a marriage that don't just carry information. They carry weather. And that sentence brought a cold front with it. He left 20 minutes later. I watched from the window as his headlights backed out of the driveway and disappeared around the corner, and then I was alone with our apartment and my thoughts and the particular dread of not knowing. I told myself it was nothing. I folded laundry. I made tea. I sat on the couch where we'd been laughing 30 minutes earlier and stared at a television I couldn't bring myself to turn on. His parents had been here before, the edge of it, the brink. Dramatic confrontations followed by tearful reunions. Packed suitcases that got unpacked. Threats that dissolved into apologies. It had a familiar rhythm at this point, almost theatrical in its repetition. Every few years, the performance. Then the reconciliation. Then the long, quiet return to normal. I kept telling myself this was that. The way he'd said it sounds serious lingered in the air of our apartment like smoke. A year and a half before that night, we'd been a different version of ourselves. Both employed. Both salaries landing in our joint account every 2 weeks with a reliability that we took for granted the way you only take things for granted until they're gone. We weren't wealthy, we were the comfortable kind of okay, the kind where you check your bank account without your stomach dropping. We had a budget, not because we needed one desperately but because I believe in knowing where you stand. That was before. The agreement had started with his sister finding something she wasn't supposed to find. She'd gone to her parents' house for a Sunday visit and ended up in the pantry looking for a snack, and there it was, a bag of canned goods with a logo on it she recognized from the food bank 2 towns over. Their mother had been in the kitchen behind her and laughed, a light, dismissive sound, the laugh of someone performing nonchalance. "Just stretching things a little, Mija. You know how it is." She knew how it was. She went home and called her brothers. There are conversations that sound like the floor just gave way, and that phone call was one of them. His parents had gone to a food bank. His mother had laughed about it. Neither of them had said a word. Within a week, all 4 siblings were on a video call that I sat beside my husband for, watching the faces of people I had come to genuinely love as they worked through the arithmetic of loyalty. The math was simple enough on paper, for adult children $100 each per month, for $100 total flowing to their parents. Not a fortune. But enough. Enough to mean they wouldn't have to choose between groceries and utilities. Enough to mean dignity. I come from a different world than my husband does. In my family, my culture, what I was watching on that screen would have been nearly inconceivable. Not the generosity itself, but the structure of it. The expectation embedded inside it. Where I grew up, parents worked until their bodies gave out and then they quietly tightened their belts before they ever reached toward their children's pockets. Pride was the currency of the household. Asking was failure. Receiving was shame. Children helped in emergencies, of course they did, but it was reactive, spontaneous, voluntary. It was never formalized into a line item. It was never a pact. My husband's family operated on a different ethic entirely. Supporting your parents as they aged wasn't a last resort. It was a first instinct. It was woven into who you were. Families were not four separate units sharing a last name, they were a single organism, and money moved through them the way blood does, without much ceremony, because that's just what organisms do. I understood it intellectually. I even admired it. But I had also been raised to protect my household like a wall. When my husband looked at me after that call and said, "It's $100, split 4 ways, it's manageable," I believed him. We talked it through the way we talk through everything, at the kitchen table, with the laptop open, numbers on the screen between us. I found the row in our spreadsheet and typed it in. Family support, $100 per month. It looked small and clean and entirely reasonable. I didn't know then that it would one day feel like a hairline crack in the foundation of our marriage. I didn't know how much weight a hairline crack can hold before it becomes something else. He lost his job in May. One meeting. One polite human resources representative with a pre-written script and a packet of severance information that felt, in his words, like being handed a balloon on the way out of a funeral. One day he was employed and the next he was not, and the world continued spinning in the exact same indifferent way it always had. We sat at the kitchen table that night with my laptop between us and the numbers spread out like a map of a country we weren't sure we could navigate. "Okay," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "We adapt. We made the list. Everything that could be cut, we cut. Subscriptions. Dinners out. The wine we liked. The gym membership he'd been meaning to use more anyway. We paused retirement contributions, a decision that cost me sleep in ways I didn't admit to him, and I went through every recurring charge on our bank account with the focused attention of someone defusing something that might explode. He thanked me. He always thanked me, which was both endearing and slightly heartbreaking. Unemployment insurance carried us for a while. Long enough that we caught our breath. Long enough that some of the dread faded into something more manageable, a low-grade worry rather than acute panic. We still lived. We still laughed. We found the small economies that allowed us to keep some joy, credit card points for flights, friends with couches and spare rooms who said of course without hesitation, packed lunches eaten in airport terminals, city buses instead of rideshares. Survival with a dusting of grace. That's how I thought of it. When December came and the unemployment payment stopped, the numbers got honest. He started donating plasma. Twice a week, he drove to a center 20 minutes away and came back with a prepaid card loaded with whatever the going rate was for what his body could offer. The first time he came home and showed it to me, he made a joke, something about bleeding for the family, something meant to be funny. I laughed because he needed me to. But there was something about watching him do that, repeatedly, methodically, without complaint, something that settled in my chest and stayed there. It wasn't pity. It wasn't frustration. It was a kind of grief, I think, for the version of our life we'd been expecting to be living by now. His parents' $100 stopped quietly. He didn't say anything about it. Neither did his siblings, at first. Until the night everything changed. He came home 3 hours after he left. I heard his key in the door and I was already off the couch before it opened. I knew from the way he moved, the careful, deliberate quality of it, like someone carrying something fragile, that whatever had happened was not the kind of thing that ends with a tearful reconciliation and packed bags getting unpacked. His face looked older. Not in any way I could have pointed to specifically, same face, same features, but something behind his eyes had changed. Like a room with one less lamp in it. "They're separating," he said. Not they're talking about separating. Not it got bad again. Just, they're separating. The certainty of it, the finality wrapped around those two words, sat in the room between us like a third person. His father had declared it done. No more reconciliations, no more tearful apologies, no dramatic reversal at the 11th hour. He was leaving. He was done. What made it complicated, what made it more than just the end of a marriage, was the house. They'd paid it off years ago, a modest home in a neighborhood that had quietly transformed around them. The block that had once been unremarkable, middle-class, forgettable, now had a coffee shop on one end and a yoga studio on the other, and the houses in between had tripled, quadrupled in value while the people inside them largely stayed the same. His parents' house was worth considerably more than it had been when they'd bought it. Real estate as unexpected inheritance. His father's offer had been almost strange in its apparent generosity. He would sign his half of the house over to her for $25,000. I did the math in my head before my husband even finished the sentence. That's nothing, I said. Compared to what half the value would actually be. I know. I stopped. Tried to read the situation. Is that generous or is that controlling? He looked at me. I couldn't tell either. His mother planned to take a loan for the $25,000, get the house fully in her name, and then, logically, practically, in the way that any financial advisor in the world would tell her, sell it. She'd walk away with a significant sum. Enough to buy a smaller place outright. Enough to live with real stability for years. Enough to not need her children to subsidize her groceries. But she didn't want to sell. It was the house where she had raised her children. The kitchen where she had made thousands of dinners. The linoleum she'd complained about for 15 years but never replaced because it was familiar. The doorframe with the pencil marks measuring her children's heights, year by year, until the marks stopped because children become adults and stop growing and eventually leave, but the pencil marks stay. You can't put that in a spreadsheet. Logic and love have been at war since the beginning of time, and love usually wins, and sometimes winning looks like a very expensive kind of losing. After the conversation with their parents, the siblings had gone to dinner. And that's where the real conversation had happened. He told me about it carefully, choosing his words the way you do when you're trying to be fair to everyone involved including yourself. They brought up the money, he said. I set down the mug I was holding. What did they say? That it doesn't look good. That we stopped contributing. You don't have income, I said. I told them that. And? They said, he paused. Drew a breath. They said that since we're a household, it should come from your income. That money inside a marriage is shared, so it's not really accurate to say you have income and I don't. We have income. I felt the heat move up my neck the way it does when something is both infuriating and not entirely wrong. They pointed out that we still travel, he added, and I could hear him trying to cushion the blow. We use credit card points, I said. We stay on friends' couches. We pack sandwiches and take buses. We don't spend money when we travel. I told them that too. What exactly were their words? He was quiet for a moment. That it looks bad. That mom is struggling and we're posting pictures from other cities and not contributing anything. I thought about the pictures. The trip we'd taken 3 months earlier, flights covered by points accumulated over years of card use, 2 nights on a pull-out couch in someone's apartment, every meal budgeted down to the dollar. What it must have looked like from the outside. What it looked like in a small square on a phone screen with a filter on it. Optics are cruel. They strip the context and leave only the image. They know you're unemployed, I said. They do. They know we cut back on everything. They do. He looked at me with the expression of someone who has 2 truths that don't fit together and doesn't know which one to hold. What do you think? He asked. And there was the real question. The one that had been waiting under all the other ones. I didn't answer immediately. I sat with it the way I sit with all financial decisions, looking at it from every angle, turning it over, checking for what I might be missing. Our budget had no breathing room. We were not drowning. I want to be precise about that, because there is a difference between tight and desperate, and we were tight. But the margin between tight and desperate is not as wide as you want it to be when you're living inside it. One car repair. One unexpected medical bill. 1 month where something went sideways and the numbers didn't work. Any of those things could push us from okay to not okay in a matter of days. Not until you have a job, I said. He didn't argue. He rarely argues about money with me. Not because I demand control, but because he trusts my judgment, genuinely and completely, in a way that I have come to understand is both a gift and a weight. He trusts me to be right. Which means I have to be right. You're right, he said. But his shoulders dropped as he said it. And that's what broke something in me. Not his words. The geometry of his body when he said them. There is a particular kind of pain that lives in the space between being right and being okay with being right. I adore my mother-in-law. This is not something I say because I'm supposed to say it. She is warm and gentle and generous in the way that people who don't have much to give are often the most generous. She calls me mija. She presses food into my hands. She remembers small things I said once, months ago, and brings them up later with a kind of loving attention that I didn't always receive growing up. We are, by any measure, genuinely close. His siblings are people I genuinely like. We have laughed together, traveled together, shared meals and memories. There is no underlying hostility between us. Which is exactly why the dinner felt like such a precise cut. Not the blunt force of people who dislike each other, but the precise sting of people who care about you applying pressure in a direction that hurts. They were not wrong that money in a marriage is shared. They were not wrong that $100, to a dual-income household, is manageable. They were not wrong that his mother's situation was real and present and deserved attention. They were also not living inside our spreadsheet. What gnaws at me? What has gnawed at me since the moment we added that line item, if I'm being completely honest with myself, is not the $100. It's the $100 becoming a question mark. Because nothing in life contracts once it expands. The house is aging. Houses always need something. His mother has a health history that has not always been kind to her. $400 a month keeps the lights on and the refrigerator full, but it doesn't repair a roof. It doesn't cover a hospital stay. It doesn't replace a water heater or a car or the 1,000 expensive things that life eventually demands. What is the plan? Not stated out loud, not at the dinner, not in the group chats, but underneath all of it, beneath the reasonable request for $100, was the quiet architecture of a larger arrangement. For children, supporting a parent, indefinitely. Which is love. Which is also, functionally, a retirement plan. And we want to have children. We plan to retire ourselves, one day, from jobs we'll work for decades. I don't want to look at our daughter or our son, whoever they will be, and feel this same quiet obligation pressing on them from the weight of what we didn't plan. The cycle has to stop somewhere. Every generation has to decide where. There's something else no one said out loud, and I've been sitting with it since the night he came home. If his mother takes the loan, pays off his father, and keeps the house that is worth considerably more than what she'll pay for it, then eventually, when she passes, that house goes to her children. Which means the support they give her now, the $100 a month times 4 times 12 times however many years, partially protects an asset they will one day inherit. I'm not saying this cynically. I genuinely don't think any of them are thinking it through in those terms. But the math is there whether anyone does the math or not. Alternatively, she sells the house. She walks away with real money. Money that gives her actual independence. Money that doesn't require her children to supplement her income. Money that lets her rent or buy a smaller place outright and live with dignity on her own terms for years. But she doesn't want to sell. So the children will fill the gap. Not because they calculated an inheritance. but because they love her. Because emotion almost always wins over efficiency. Because the pencil marks on the doorframe mean something that no appraiser can value. I understand this. I feel it too. But understanding why someone makes a choice and being able to afford the consequences of that choice are two different things. That night, after we turned off the lights and lay in the particular silence of two people who have said everything and not enough of everything, he rolled toward me. "Do you think they're right?" he asked. "About what?" "That we should contribute. Even now." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. "I think," I said, finally, "that we are one emergency away from real stress." He was quiet. "I feel like I'm failing," he said. That word dropped into the room like something falling from a great height. Failing. I turned to face him in the dark. This man who drives to a plasma center twice a week. Who updates his resume and sends cold emails into the void and does every exhausting, humiliating, grinding thing that unemployment demands. Who never complained, not once, not to me, not that I heard, even when the popcorn and the couch and the arguing about television was all we had. "You're not failing," I said. "I'm 32 years old," he whispered. "My parents' marriage is falling apart. My dad won't work. And I can't give my mom $100. I took his hand. "The thing I wanted to say was, the fact that this matters to you this much is exactly why you're not failing. But grief doesn't respond well to logic, even when the logic is true. We will help when we can," I said. "But we don't set ourselves on fire to keep someone else warm." He squeezed my fingers. "I know," he said. But the tension didn't leave his body. I could feel it in his hand, still there, coiled and quiet. The weight of two things that are both true. She needs help and we cannot give it right now. The place where love runs up against reality and has to sit with the collision. I held his hand until his breathing slowed. He has been interviewing aggressively. I want that on the record. He updates his resume the way I update our budget, methodically, with attention to detail, never satisfied until it's right. He networks with the focused discomfort of someone who finds it unnatural but does it anyway because the alternative is worse. He prepares for interviews the night before, practicing answers in the bathroom mirror when he thinks I'm asleep, which I know because I'm almost never actually asleep. There have been second-round conversations. Promising signals. The kind of news that makes you allow yourself, carefully and cautiously, to begin hoping again. When he gets a job, this conversation will change. Not disappear, change. We'll revisit the $100. We'll put it back in the spreadsheet. We'll do more if we can, if things stabilize, if the breathing room comes back. Because I mean it when I say I want his mother safe. I want her stable. I want her in a home where she doesn't have to laugh off a bag of food bank canned goods like it's a joke. But wanting something for someone and being capable of providing it are not the same thing. Not right now. I can feel the shift. Subtle, no one has said anything else directly, but present. The slight recalibration in the way his siblings speak to me. The things not quite said. The moment at a recent family gathering when I caught a glance I wasn't supposed to catch, a flicker of something passing between his brother and his sister that ended the moment I looked their way. They see Instagram stories. They see pictures from cities we visited, places we've been, moments of joy that don't come with captions explaining the points redemption and the borrowed couches and the packed lunches and the plasma appointments. They see evidence of a life that looks, from the outside, comfortable enough to absorb $100 commitment. They don't see the spreadsheet. They don't see me, in December, removing every optional line item one by one, the way a surgeon removes things that are threatening the patient. They don't see the plasma card. They don't see the nights we decline dinner invitations with friends because we're holding the line on the budget and that's just what holding the line requires. This is not self-pity. This is just, the full picture is rarely visible from the outside, and most people make their judgments from the outside. I would rather be quietly misunderstood than compromise our foundation trying to correct the misunderstanding. I have thought about caving. There have been moments, lying awake at 3 a.m. with his mother's warmth in my memory and his shame in my chest, where I've thought, it's just $100, I make a salary, we have a roof over our heads, this is a small thing. And then I do the math again. Not because I'm mercenary. Because this is what I do. Because numbers tell a story that feelings don't always want to hear, and I have spent enough of my life learning to listen to the story even when I'd rather not. The $100 isn't the problem. The $100 is a line in a ledger. The line itself is fine. What keeps me awake is what the line represents. What becomes expected once it's there, what grows around it like something living, what it means about who we are to this family and what they're building on the assumption of our consistency. If we resume during this period, if we establish that even unemployed, even living on one income, even plasma donating tight, we can maintain this contribution, then we have told them something. We have demonstrated a capacity that doesn't exist. And then when the situation shifts, when the mother needs something more, when the question comes around again, the baseline will have been proven. We can't sustain what we'd be promising. And I have watched what happens when people promise things they can't sustain. I have watched marriages crack under the weight of it. I have watched resentment grow in the silence between two people who love each other but can't talk honestly about money because the honest version is too painful. I love my husband too much to let that happen to us. So here is where I land, after all of it. I am not heartless. I am not callous. I am not the villain of a story about cultural values and filial obligation, though I understand why I might look like one from certain angles. I am a woman who looks at the numbers and tells the truth about what they say. I am a wife who is trying to protect our household from the kind of slow damage that doesn't announce itself. The kind that accumulates quietly, resentment by resentment, sacrifice by sacrifice, until one day you look at the person you love most and feel the distance that grew while you weren't watching. I can live with his siblings' side eyes. I can live with being misunderstood by people who don't have access to our spreadsheet. I can live with the cultural dissonance, the feeling of existing between two different frameworks for what family means and what it costs. What I cannot live with is watching us fracture under the weight of an obligation we took on in better circumstances and couldn't let go of when the circumstances changed. When he has a job, we'll revisit. When the income returns, the conversation changes. Until then, we are not the answer to someone else's financial planning. We are not the safety net and the tightrope walker. We are two people trying to make it to the other side of a hard year with our foundation intact. He knows this. I think part of him is relieved that I'm the one who can say it. And every night, when I turn off the light and he reaches for my hand in the dark, I remind myself. Protecting us is loving them. The line I draw around our household is not a wall. It's a floor. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone is to make sure the floor holds.